Everyone. Welcome to another episode of Freshly Pressed. Today we have with us Thomas, the creator of Kingsville. Welcome to the show, Thomas. How are you?
Thank you, Rob. Always enjoy being with you, my friend.
In your own words, can you introduce yourself to
Sure.
everyone and give us a brief history about yourself?
Yeah. My name is Thomas. I'm the creator and writer of the comic book Kingsville. Um, and longtime comic book fan. Love anything and everything comic books. I also am a big collector of action figures that are related to mainly comic books, although I might have a few movie ones as well. But I spend a lot of money that I probably shouldn't, and my wife lets me know that quite often.
That's amazing. We can
Yeah.
definitely see all the amazing collection behind you.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
That's absolutely great. What got you into comics in the first place, Thomas?
Growing up, Saturday morning cartoons was probably my first entrance into comic books. Although obviously I knew comic books existed before, I was never. I don't know. It never kind of dawned on me that this whole other world existed through comic books. So I knew they existed. I had friends who had them. Just wasn't that interested. But getting into in the early 80s, Justice League, Spider-Man cartoon, all these different cartoons that were on. GI Joe was huge for me. I was a big GI Joe fan. And then all of a sudden a comic book store opened up by my house. Friends and I rode our bikes up there one day, and I did not realize that they had comic books based on the cartoons I had been watching. Little did I know the cartoons were actually based on the comic books that I just saw. So that whole world opened up to me, and all these new stories about the Justice League that weren't part of the Saturday morning cartoons. And they were a little bit more mature in the comic book as opposed to the cartoon. And, I could read things that maybe I wasn't supposed to be reading because, my parents probably assumed that it was the same thing that was in the cartoons. So, yeah, the whole world opened up to me, and I was very fortunate to have this comic book store, maybe 5 or 6 blocks from my house, so we could ride our bikes whenever we had extra money and go up there and bug the owner to help find comic books that met our budget. And we ended up going quite often, and we went for many years until the comic book shop actually closed, which was a sad day for us. But the owner there had gotten married and started having children, and it became a little bit, I think, more difficult to run a comic book shop. And I think he was a teacher as well at night. So, anyways, it closed, but my love for comics had already taken place, and because of that, I off and on throughout my entire life up to now, I collected comic books. So for 40 years, I've been collecting comic books, or close to 40 years. So
Oh wow, that's amazing.
yeah.
That's amazing. What are your favorite characters from comic books? Do you from the big two? Do you call yourself a Marvel guy or a DC guy?
Yeah, I would say I'm probably more of a DC guy. And I know that you don't have to hate one to like one better, right? So I love both of them. A lot of times when you say a DC guy, right, everyone just all of a sudden they want to put you into a. I love both of them, to be honest. I own a lot. I mean, my favorite team, although I love Justice League, is probably Fantastic Four, which is on the Marvel side. But my favorite characters are on the DC side. So I'm a huge Green Lantern fan. That's probably my favorite comic book. But I love Superman, Batman, Flash. Anybody related to the Justice League, Wonder Woman, I love. So I mean, I love both, but I would probably consider myself more of a DC guy.
That's amazing. Well, like you said, why hate any side? I
Yeah,
we love the big two and the indies and
yeah,
everything in between, right?
absolutely. I mean, I would say today I probably spend 60, 70% of my money on indie comics now, as opposed to the
Yeah,
big two. Just because some of the stories that are coming out of independent comics are just amazing. And
yeah,
unfortunately for the big two, they've lost so much talent to the indie side. Scott Snyder is doing most of his stuff on the indie side, which has been amazing. Jeff Johns just announced Ghost Machine, and so he started this whole indie comic with Image. So that a lot of the amazing talent that we've had on the DC and the Marvel side, unfortunately for them, good for us as
I know.
comic book fans, but unfortunately for the big two, they've lost a lot of talent over the last few years of that talent wanting to own their own IP and moving into comic books where they could kind of hold on to their creation. So we'll see what happens with the big two. I mean, they're still producing amazing comic books, but I do feel like a lot of the really amazing
Yeah.
writers that we've grown up with over the last 10 years have kind of left and are starting to do their own thing, which is cool too.
Absolutely, absolutely. I agree
Yeah.
100%. And I think the stories do become more and more authentic, right? Because these creators do want to tell these stories their own way. Maybe they
Yeah.
can't do it in the same way when they're part of Marvel or DC or any other like big publisher. So
Yeah.
maybe yeah. So go
Yeah, no,
ahead
I
and
think so. I mean, yeah, when you're writing a comic book for Superman, at least the way I think it should be done, right, is you have this amazing history of Superman that you have to respect as you're writing for Superman, right? So if you start to write Superman and Superman is doing unsuperman things, you're going to lose a lot of readers because of that, right? Because we know who Superman is. There's just this huge history of Superman. And that goes with Spider-Man as well, or any other. So if you're a writer of those characters and you start to bring in stuff that doesn't make sense to readers, you will lose readers, right? And I think as a writer and as a creator, you have these stories you want to tell, and you might be limited if you are writing for those characters. So going off and doing your own thing, I think, is an amazing way to tell stories that you've always wanted to tell, but you've been kind of limited because, unfortunately, Spider-Man doesn't fly. And so if you have an idea of a character who's flying, you probably shouldn't try and bring that into Spider-Man. If it's not, you're going to piss off a lot of Spider-Man fans because we know that's not Spider-Man's thing, right? And so that's the great thing about indie comics is there's this whole other world that you could tell these amazing stories. And if you go back to Spider-Man, you're going to have to be within those walls of what Spider-Man represents. And so indie comics is this amazing opportunity for writers to tell these incredible stories. And that's why I really love indie comics a lot.
very true. Very true. Very true.
Yeah.
Awesome. Get us a give us a bit of understanding of what Kingsville is, and get us a bit into the story of it. What happened in issue one, and what's the issue two about, without spoiling it, of course.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, yeah. No, thank you, Saral. I appreciate that. So yeah, Kingsville is named after an island nation. And Kingsville is a small nation. It is a mining town. So most of the people that live within Kingsville are really involved in mining and fishing because it is an island. It's a very cold island. It's covered with ice, half of the time of the year. And so that other time of the year when it's not covered by ice, they work really hard on mining and fishing in order to prepare for the time where it's a little bit harder to do so. And as they're mining, they find this element, this mineral called psychodone. And they don't really know what to do with it. They know it's special because it looks different. But AGS, which is on the continent, the main continent, they are a nonprofit, unelected organization that brings nations together to do things that help people, right? So they bring these nations together. They create trade deals between these nations to help bring, whatever's needed for those nations together to help people thrive. They help with safety, all these amazing things. Well, they get their hands on this mineral and they know it's something special too. So they start to purchase it from Kingsville. They bring it into their in house science department. And this science department starts to play with it. And they realize there's elements of psychodome that you can be utilized to do something very unique. And as they keep playing with it, they find out that when done right, you could actually give superhuman powers to people. It's a very limited mineral. They don't find a lot of it, but what they do find, AGS has got their hands on it, and they start to produce a superhuman team. And in order to help grow, what they do is they promise these nations that become part of AGS that they will place a superhuman within their nation to help with safety and anything else that nation needs, which makes AGS even more popular and more nations want to become part of AGS. So
Mm.
on the outside, right, they're doing all these amazing things, and they truly are, right? They're helping with safety, they're helping with trade, they're bringing food to nations that need food, they're bringing safety to nations that need safety. But there's this underlining element as they gain more and more power that they kind of create a hunger for that power, and they start to use these superhumans in an unethical way to continue to gain power. And that's where issue one kind of comes in. Outwardly, they're doing these great things, but we see the kind of ins and outs of what Dr. Derrickson, who is the head of AGS, is doing with these superhumans, and it's not good. And you see in issue one, as people start to notice that AGS is not doing what they said that they were going to do. In issue one, we see how they handle people like that, that's rise up against them.
Mm,
And so that kind of ends issue number one. And then we jump right into issue two, and it just takes it to a whole nother level.
mm,
Kingsville starts to notice that AGS is doing things with that mineral that is not ethical. Or at least they hear rumblings of it. And that was enough for them to say, look, we're not going to sell this to them anymore. And that pisses off Dr. Derrickson and AGS. And
mm,
they start to take matters into their own hands. And you see that kind of bitterness and frustration between AGS and Kingsville start to come to a head in issue two. And issue three, it's going to come to war. And so
wow.
issue two is kind of that bridge between things seem to be okay and things are not okay at all. And so issue two is going to be a pivotal issue in kind of telling that story. And that's where we're at today. Issue two is almost complete. We're just doing the last few pages of lettering, but all the artwork is done. Colors, all of it's done. And so I'm just finishing the lettering. Unfortunately, I'm the one that's doing the lettering. And, I really learned on issue one. Issue two, I've gotten a lot better at it. But, as we become more successful with this, obviously I could probably start to hire some of this out. But as you know,
Mm,
as an independent creator, we're trying to save dollars anywhere we can while still
yeah.
putting out a pretty good comic book. And yeah, I do the creating, writing, and lettering, and then our artist Dan Zay does the penciling, inking, and coloring. And between us two, issue one came out, and we were pretty successful. We had a successful Kickstarter with that.
Mm.
And then issue two, we're hoping that we have a successful Kickstarter with this one, which we're doing pretty good. We're about 66% to goal with about 20 days to go. So
That's great. Yeah, yeah. I hope you make some stretch goals.
yeah, we have some amazing stretch goals. We created our first trading card set, collector's card set. We have an amazing poster that will come signed. It's an 18 by 11-inch poster, so it's a pretty good size. And then we have these really cool poker chips that have cover A, which has collapse on it, and then death. Death Day, which is picture on the right there. He is on the cover of issue two, and we have him on the other side of the poker chips. So yeah, it'll be a lot of fun.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Is that they gives a lot of Deadshot vibes to me. I don't know why. Is that
Yeah, for sure.
is inspiration for Death Day?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, he's a ninja. Obviously, has superpowers. Yeah, he's definitely got a little bit of that in him. Although he doesn't carry around guns or anything. He's got a bunch of swords and knives and all kinds of stuff like that. But yeah, for sure, he has a lot of that going for him. Very stealth like, and someone you don't really want to mess with. He has no problem taking your head off.
That's amazing. You have
So
some
right
amazing
here,
creators.
right, this is revealing a lot of new characters on that page right there. You have Lady Lex, which we shared at the end of issue one, the last page. We have a pretty good spread. I can show it to you right here on the very last page. This is Lady Lex, and she is a blend. Let me see if I can pull it up right here. Right here. That's Lady Lex right there. So you have her on that page as well. You have Collapse. You have Death Day. You have Thomas Gunner, which is down at the bottom left, and he's a sharpshooter. He's also been through a lot of war. Grew up in a very war torn nation. So all he knows is war. We have a couple other amazing ladies. We have our version of kind of the Flash. His name is Zip, and he's in the top
Right.
right.
Yeah.
So yeah, just a lot of really cool characters. We have in the bottom right. Her name is Vogger, and she is queen of the wolves. So everywhere she goes, she has a wolf with her. Someone also you don't want to mess with. Very good at hand-to-hand combat. Also, will just shoot a bullet right through your head. But she also walks around with her pet wolf that has no problem tearing you to pieces. So yeah, it's a lot of really cool characters. We reveal a lot of characters in issue 2, and there'll be more characters in issue 3. Actually, you'll see a new character being developed in issue 2, and you'll kind of see how they do it. And what they've been able to do is, in issue 1, the characters that they're creating just gives them superpowers.
Hmm.
In issue 2, they start to blend insects and animals with the psychodone. It's called Faradone. So once they create the actual serum, it's called Faradone, and they're able to add elements of animals and insects to give them even more specialized powers. So you'll see that come forth in issue 2 and issue 3.
That's so interesting. That's
Yeah,
amazing. Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to it. The art keeps getting incredible by
yeah.
panel as well. Like I feel like the coolness factor in just this whole page is so high. Like it's amazing. Like all these new characters, their design is amazing. The colors have gotten much better as well. The whole ambient nature of like the color and lighting in the whole book gives it a little bit of an edge because of how the story is set up and the world is set up. So yeah, really well done on these actually. Like
Mm-hmm.
I love everything that you have done with
Yeah,
with these characters, especially like Death Day. Death Day is so cool as a character.
yeah.
It's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm very fortunate to work with Daniel Zay, a young artist out of Moscow, Russia. He's been there since day one with me, and we're already working, like I said, on issue 3. We got the first pages. The first 2 pages are done. They're inked. They're colored. And he's just an amazing young talent. I think you're going to see a lot more from him. So I'm very fortunate. As obviously the story, it's important that you have a good story, but it's even more important, I think, sometimes that you have an amazing artist. So, Daniel Zay has been absolutely incredible for me, and he just gets better and better with every page that he does. These 2 pages right here, these 2 covers, I work with Marvel artist Will Torres. He has worked with Dynamite. He's done covers for The Boys. He has worked for Marvel with their new game Snap. So he's designed a lot of the cards, their playing cards. And so he works for Marvel right now. And then he did just 2 covers, actually did 3 covers. There's a special cover that we haven't revealed yet that will be coming out as soon as we fund. And it's a partnership with another group called Collective Comics. And I can't wait to reveal that. But these 2 covers right here, we called it the Clean and the Bloody. And this is a picture of Dr. Derrickson with some of those special superhumans that he has created. And then the other
Mhm.
one is the same picture, but they're all full of blood. And that really kind of tells you the 2 versions of AGS that you see throughout the comic book. Most people see that top version where they're super clean, they're doing all these great things. But as you start to really see who they are, that bottom cover really is reality, right? They all have blood on their hands and they're doing some really evil stuff. So, yeah, I was really happy to work with Will. That's his version of my characters. Obviously, the art is much different than Daniel, but that's Will's version. And I love it because of that, right? And then there's a third version, like I said, which I think you're going to really like. We have a Virgin cover, and then obviously the cover with Kingsville of this other one. And it's going to be a specialized one that there's only going to be a very few. I think 100 is what we're going to make of those covers.
Oh wow, that's amazing. That's exactly what variant covers are all about, right? Like
Yeah,
introducing a different style, a different kind of texture to the whole characters, and a different artist's take on the same characters is
yeah,
obviously a lot of fun to see. That's amazing. I
absolutely.
absolutely love these 2 covers, and with what you just said, it just takes a very different meaning
Yeah,
and just elevates it. a little bit
Yeah.
more.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Exactly. I
yeah,
mean, wait till,
great work on the whole book so far. Like obviously issue
thank you
one
so much.
is incredible. It's really well done. It's
Thank
very
you.
well paced actually. I really liked issue one because uh I, I remember when I first read it, it felt like it had a certain like when you read it, it's not too fast, but also not too slow. It was proceeding in the right way. But then when the new when the superpowered humans characters kick in, the whole gear shifts into like it just moves much faster from there. So yeah, you can feel that when the gears change and when things go faster. It's amazing.
Mm. I appreciate it, Saurabh. Yeah, I mean, I had a lot of fun doing it. Obviously, like you, right? We grew up big fans of comic books. I think all comic book fans. I almost believe all comic book fans, as you're growing, if you grew up as a child and grew up in comic books, you sat down and you either trace comic characters, try to draw them yourself, and then you take Spider-Man and then you would try and do something a little different with Spider-Man and say, okay, this is my character. When
Yeah,
anybody else looking at that goes through, that's Spider-Man, and all you do is add a gun, right? But to us, right, we were creating our own characters, and that just builds and builds over time. And then as you become an adult, and all my kids are grown now I'm at a point in my life where that dream of creating my own comic book I could bring to fruition, right? Because I don't have as much responsibility in my family to care for my children because they're all adults and they're all doing their own thing now. So yeah, it's a perfect time in my life to say, look, I've always had a dream of creating my own comic book. Let's do it. And got the okay, although my wife regrets telling me okay now, but she gave me the okay. And now I'm all in, man. The goal is to produce a 4-story arc, get that out, turn it into a trade with like a one shot at the end of the trade. Because what I'd like to do is take Collapse, which is the big guy right there.
yeah,
I'd like to do a one shot on him because I think he's a pretty unique character. I have him right here too. He was. This is our cover A for issue number one.
yeah.
He's been so far kind of the fan favorite as far as the superhumans, at least in sales. Right, I probably sell 65% of this cover and then my other cover right here, which also is amazing. I think this is Snapback right here.
Mm.
But yeah, for whatever reason, and I get it. I Collapse is probably my favorite looking one as well. I'm also kind of a big guy right here, so I could relate to Collapse. But um,
Likewise.
yeah, but I love him, right? So he's obviously a large human being, huge, not super fast because of his size, but his superpower is not only strength, but he could collapse into a pool of liquid, and then all of a
Oh
sudden he
wow.
becomes faster than anybody. He could go across up walls, under doors, all that good stuff, and that's what makes him very unique. So you look at him and you think, oh, I could outrun this guy if he tries to come after me. Once he collapses, you're done, right? And then when he comes up out of liquid form, you'll see in the book one of his special moves is he comes up with an uppercut, and he could pretty much take your head off when he does that. So he's someone you
Oh,
don't want to mess with. His upbringing is sad. It's terrible how he was brought up, and that's why he could kill at will, and he doesn't really have a lot of remorse because that's the environment that he grew up in. So I want to do a one shot of him just to kind of tell that story. And at some point, we'll create a trade where I have a one shot. And then Snapback is completely different, right? He grew up in a very well-to-do family, was kind of
mm.
that jock on campus, super popular, very arrogant, thinks he's much bigger than he really is, and very annoying, right? He's got a joke for everything. He tries to belittle anyone around him to make himself feel bigger than he is. He's that one guy most of us would hate if you were around him. And he's actually the leader of the superhuman team for Dr. Derrickson and AGS. But his superpower is his arms and legs could stretch. So it's kind of a Reed Richards type thing. But what makes him different is he wears these shoulder pads that come to a point,
Right.
and those shoulder pads he takes off and wears as a glove, and his arms shoot forward and they snap back. And you see that if he does that and he's wearing those, his arm will go right through you and come right back. So he also can kill at will, although he doesn't have the lack of remorse to the level that Collapse does, because at the end of the day most of his toughness is kind of made up, right? He's constantly trying to prove that he's tough, but he's not, right? He does kind of have a little bit of a heart, and he does all these outward things like being obnoxious to kind of hide that, because he thinks that's a weakness. So eventually, we'll do a one shot of him as well. So yeah, those are the two main characters in issue one, and then you could see in issue two we reveal a lot more characters.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's so amazing. I've all right. I think I'll get into the process a little bit
Mm-hmm.
next, Thomas. So, what's your what's your creation process like? What do you like to go first? Because I'm also a writer, and I love to create character sheets first before even I create the structure, because I just love to write character back, like histories and stuff like that.
Yeah,
So I do that first. But what's your process like?
yeah. Yeah, so I think there's two processes that I take, that are a little different, right? You have the process of writing the story, and I outline the whole story, and as you go through it, right, you make a lot of changes as you're actually putting it onto paper. But I kind of highlight, like, in a general way, this is what the story is going to look like. And then on another side, I start to create characters, and I try to create characters that have different backgrounds. Um, and so that's a completely different process. And I want to try and create a very diverse group of characters, with diverse backgrounds. I'm a father of three girls and one boy. Um, and my son has lived in Texas by himself for since he was 18. He's a lineman, so he climbs poles and does electrical wires on telephone poles and that type of stuff. So he's been gone since he was 18, working, off on his own. And then my other three daughters were here for a while. In fact, two still live with me, even though they're adults. So I grew up with three sisters as well. So I was the only boy. So my whole life I've been surrounded by women, and these women are obviously extremely important to me. And so you'll see I have characters that I built that are based off of my son. He's from Texas. He likes to go hunting and do that kind of stuff. So you'll see that one character you were talking about, Thomas Gunner, that is my son. So I based that off of my son. And
Right.
then I have three daughters. So Lady Lex, I have a daughter named Alexis. And that character, the one in red, is based off of my daughter Alexis. Um,
Mm,
I have a daughter, Hannah, who is not on here. She has a special character. She's my youngest, and she will come out at the very end of issue three. She's one of those super humans that they made a mistake on as they were trying to develop Ferrodone, which became the serum that was used to make superhumans. So you'll see her later on, but her name is Hannah, and you'll see a character named after her. In the
mm,
On the left hand side, the third character down, that is Sarah. Her name is Sarah Sorrow, and her special power is, when she is around you, she could bring the worst memories that you've ever had in your life and make them feel as if they're real again. And so when
mm.
she wants to mess with you and mess with your head, her superpower is she could do that by taking tragedy and making you relive, that tragedy all over again. So her name is Sarah Sorrow. And so you don't want to get too close to her, because if she doesn't like you, or if she feels like she needs to take care of you in a terrible way, she could put you in a state where you want to kill yourself because of the sorrow that's been brought upon you, and it's all your worst memories of things that have really happened to you. And so that's Sarah Sorrow. So you can see I've taken all my kids and I've developed a character based on them. But all these
Yep.
characters, right? Obviously, my daughter is a pretty happy person, and so that's not the reality of Sarah. But I wanted to create characters, right, that have these unique powers, and that's what I did with all of these. The other one, right to the right of Sarah Sorrow, that is based off of my niece. Her name is Katie, or Kate, and so her name is Killer Kate. And she has a lot of. She's almost like a the Green Arrow, the female version of Green Arrow. And she
Right.
also had some issues that took place, when she was created as a superhuman. And you'll see some of those issues come to light in probably issue 3 and 4. But yeah, so this is the team right here. All of them have superhuman strength, but they all have unique abilities. But they all are very strong in their own right.
Nice, nice. I think a lot of, and I don't know if this is true, but reading issue one, I feel like you like to write a lot of characters who have shades of gray rather than just black or white.
Yeah,
Uh, Sort of people on morally ambiguous spectrum,
yeah,
because I feel like they definitely have an edge over characters that are like overtly black or white, like,
yeah.
they're just, like, just, yeah, you can be out and out positive or out and out negative, but yeah, this
Yeah, I
having
agree.
characters in the gray.
Yeah, no, fully agree with you, Sarab. I mean, all these characters, right? They could certainly kill whenever needed, and Dr. Derrickson has have them do that quite often. But you'll see as the story continues, there will be some of these characters that have a much softer side to them, and yeah, well, I don't want to give anything away in issue 4 and beyond, but
Yeah.
not all of them will remain the way they are today. Let's just say that. And that could be a good thing or a bad thing. We'll see how that all turns out. But yeah, they all have unique abilities. A lot of those abilities obviously are blended with their upbringing. And some of their upbringings are perfect if you want a killer, like Collapse. You know, he grew up around that. So it's very normal for him to snap somebody's neck and walk away. It's not that big of a deal because life has no meaning to him. Whereas someone else can do it and they walk away from it, but it kind of haunts them the more they do this because that's not really who they are. That's who they've become, and they don't like it anymore. And so we'll get into who those characters are in the future. But yeah, I like to draw them a little bit more gray. Although I think Collapse is a little more black and white. I think he just likes killing. But not everyone is like that for sure.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. That's amazing. Cool. I usually ask this to everyone, but yeah, what are your top? And this is obviously a very different tangent to go on. What are your top five um, pop culture favorite things? Say, could be comics, could be movies. Things
Yeah.
that inspire you. You feel like, um, yeah, you love them so much that you want to maybe incorporate that in your work, or
Mhm.
even do it at the subliminal level, like, uh, or just things that you love, like top five pop culture things.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, obviously, comic books is huge for me. You know, Invincible is probably my favorite comic book that I've ever read. So I have that's the only comic series that I have every issue of. I have 1 through 144. I have another box full of you know, other issues that have unique covers and whatnot, variants. I have a whole box of variants. I have every toy made by them. I love that. And then Spawn is another one where I don't have issues 1 through 347. I think they're on now, but I have quite a bit of them. I have a lot of Spawn figures. So Todd McFarlane has had a huge impact on my love for comic books. I mean, that those years in '92 when those you know, Seven had left Marvel and started Image Comics. I mean, you probably know, Rob. I mean, that changed the game at in the comic
Yeah,
world, right? It was Marvel, DC. Certainly, there were independents at that time too, but very obscure, right? You had Malibu. You had a few of these companies that were out, but for the most part, I would say the market was dominated by Marvel and DC. And when those few left Marvel and started Image Comics, it brought so many new people into comic books. I mean, I don't know if you grew up around hip hop, but you know, you had the at the time in the '90s, NWA was huge in the rap scene, and you
mm,
had Easy E, which was the head of the NWA. There's a video of Rob Liefeld signing autographs for Easy E because Easy E waited in a line in downtown LA to get his autograph because he was so
wow.
excited. So, I mean, the impact that Image had on comic books. It brought so many new people into the comic scene, and it changed comics for me forever, right? And then when Spawn came
Yeah.
forth, with Silvestri and Cyberforce came forth, I mean, I get chills thinking about it. My love for comics just went into overdrive. So I would say that had a huge impact on my love for comic books. Spawn and kind of that mature comic book. That was really the first comic book that I saw where you could have a lot of murder. You could see a very dark story, a tragic story, a story of revenge, a story of someone trying to find the love of his life because he didn't realize that he was even dead. I mean, those stories didn't exist at that level in Marvel and DC because I don't think they
Yeah.
realized you could tell those stories at that time. And Image said, yeah, you can. And actually, there's a hunger for those stories. So I would say that was probably a huge one. Transformers, the movie, had a huge impact on my life. Optimus Prime dying was one of the first kind of cartoons that I watched that I had to. I mean, I cried, man. That just didn't happen in my little world, right? It was a world of, a lot of beautiful, awesome things that were taking place in comics, and all of a sudden I'm watching Transformers, which I loved, and my beloved character dies. I couldn't get over that.
Yeah.
That just didn't happen in my life. I didn't see death like that. So that was a huge impact on me. Obviously, like Justice League and a team of heroes coming together, and
Yeah.
doing good by society had a huge impact on me on the positive side. Again, when Invincible came out, it took that gore to a next level. I remember reading like the first
Mm.
few issues, and I go, "Man, this is just a knockoff of Spider-Man, right? Young kid gets superpowers, tries to figure out how to blend those superpowers, and then all of a sudden, Omni Man, his father, just goes off the deep end, and the real Omni
Yeah.
Man comes
Yeah.
forth, and just the amount of gore, I just got so excited, and I was hooked from that day. And then later
Yeah.
on, you saw like the comic book The Boys, and obviously the Amazon series, the Prime series that came out, had a huge impact on me. But the comic book, I don't think people realize when I started reading the comic book is 10 times worse than the actual Prime series. If you've read it, the craziness of that comic book is just beyond even comprehension. And so
Yep.
they've just scratched the surface of how crazy the comic book is on that TV series. So yeah, those type of things. Transformers had a huge impact on me. Star Wars. So I was born in the 70s, so you already had Star Wars. Empire Strikes came back out. Return of the Jedi was huge for me because that was kind of the first movie I saw in a theater of Star Wars. And I had all the figures. That had a huge impact on me. Man, what else? Just so much stuff. Pac-Man. I
I
don't know if you
know. I
remember,
know.
Rob, there was an actual cartoon series, a Pac-Man cartoon series, because of the popularity of the
Oh,
video game.
really?
So, yeah, and I remember watching that on Saturday mornings. So, I don't know. There's a lot of things, and then sports. I'm a huge fan of sports. Big fan of baseball. Grew up playing baseball, so that was huge for me. But yeah, I don't know. That's a lot.
Oh, that's a lot. That's amazing. That's
Yeah,
really good as well. And yeah, plenty of good stuff in there. I think Invincible TV series is good. Like you said,
yeah,
it's nowhere close to the comics, the
yeah,
craziness. I feel a lot of it gets toned down when adapting for TV. Like
yeah.
I was watching Paper Girls TV show, though no,
Mhm.
like, have you seen that TV show?
I haven't seen the TV show, but I've read the comic.
Yeah, so comics is amazing. It has all sorts of craziness built into it, right? Like,
Yeah,
uh, yeah, there's like TV show kind of starts to scratch the surface a little bit.
yeah,
It is still it has a lot of weirdness factor,
yeah,
but it's not as crazy as the books, and it's more focused on the drama
yeah,
between the girls, which is kind of like rightly so, because on a
yeah,
TV show you have to make characters more
yeah,
relatable and grounded, and like you have to appeal to a larger audience. But yeah, like comic books can take things to the next level if
yeah.
they wanted to.
That is for sure. I mean, that's what I love about this medium is, the rules continue to shrink and shrink. Growing up, there were a lot of rules around how you would write a comic book. And, today, a lot of those rules have just been thrown away. and especially on the independent side. I mean, I think there's still some rules on DC and Marvel, and I'm glad those rules are there. To be honest, right? I really don't want to see Batman get flying powers, right? I just that's not Batman anymore. And in fact, some of the comic books that I read today that I grew up with, they're already different enough to where it kind of turns me off a little bit. Because I feel like those characters have so much history that you want to kind of hold to those history, right? Batman is a very troubled person, but he's a billionaire, and he's taken his money and he's been able to develop this character that in his eyes is doing good for Gotham City. And I love that storyline. And there's a lot of tragedy along the way. Some things that he does that he thinks is going to be better for Gotham really isn't, and he creates more trouble than was there before, right? But if you look at the villains within that world, outside of Spider-Man, and a lot of people have this argument like which one has the better villains, Spider-Man or Batman? And I mean, the villains in Batman were almost as popular as Batman, right? I mean, where do you have that in any
Yeah.
kind of series, right? So I love everything
Yes.
about Batman, and I do get frustrated when I see. And again, I don't want to call anybody out, and some people love it, and so maybe it's just not for me. And that's okay too. Maybe I'm just older and grumpier about it, but I want to see Batman remain Batman, right? I don't want to see him gain new powers and stuff like that. I want him to be Batman. But you could tell that same story on the indie side, and there's no rules at all, which I love. So if you want a Batman that can fly, you could create that character, and there's a lot of them out there that can do that, right? And so that's what I
Yeah.
love about the indie scene is there's no rules. You could tell those stories. Also, I think indie has been really important about bringing about diversity within comic books. People want to see themselves and their own life within a comic book, and it's really hard to do that with Superman. But you could do that in an indie comic, and that's why I love indie comics, because you can create those stories that I think are very important to bring new readers in. And I'll be honest, my comic book is dominated, at least the main characters. You have Rodrigo, you have Marissa. Rodrigo is Hispanic, and I made that the case on purpose because my wife is Mexican, my kids are all half Hispanic, and I wanted to create a character that is Hispanic because I don't think there's a lot of representation of that Hispanic culture within comic books. So that was really important for me to put that in there, because I wanted to have something that that community can relate to. So I'm hoping that I do right by that character. Again, I don't want to make that the focus of it because that's not the focus. But I could have made him whoever I wanted to, but I made him purposely named Rodrigo, and purposely made him Hispanic for that reason. So that's what's beautiful about indie comics
Yeah.
is you
Yeah.
can do
Absolutely.
that, and it's important.
Absolutely. Oh, we were talking about
Yeah,
Jessica
it's
Cruz a
very
while
important,
back,
I
right?
think.
Jessica Cruz is Hispanic as well.
And you'll see within the
um,
comic book, there's other characters that are like that as well for that reason.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, that's amazing. I've seen so many comics lately focus completely on diversity, and that I think it just makes the pot a little bit richer, right? Like you can
Yeah,
bring cultural
absolutely.
nuances to your characters, and uh, yeah, it just adds a whole lot of fun to it
Yeah,
as well. So yeah.
agree. I mean, it's needed, right? I mean, if you want comic books to thrive long term, and you want to relate to the as many within the audience as possible, and I don't think it's the most important thing, but I think it's up there. You got to have characters that people could relate with, and that's where diversity comes in. And it's extremely important that people see things that happen to these characters that they can relate to. And the reality is, if you grew up in Mexico City, how you grew up is probably a lot different than if you grew up in Nashville, Tennessee, right, or Sydney, Australia. I mean, it's extremely different type of upbringing. So if you want to relate to someone in Mexico City, you probably should have some elements of a character that are relatable then. And I don't see anything wrong with that. I think that's a good thing. Um,
That's a great thing. Yeah, I,
yeah,
I agree 100%. Yeah.
agree.
Yeah, I know we were discussing this some time ago, like a while back, and then this was like, like, for example, Green Lantern is such a great
Oh,
framework to introduce
mm,
new characters, right? Like we were talking about Jessica
yeah,
Cruz and Simon Baz. They're
yeah,
like they're more reminiscent of the kind of youth we have today, and both diverse and from different cultures, but still very American.
yeah,
And they talk like young people today. They are all very funny, quippy,
yeah,
and they like to riff off each other and things like that. So
yeah.
yeah, like it's great that mainstream comics are also trying to find ways and frameworks to actually bring these characters in. I love that they're new characters rather than, like you
Mhm.
said, make an existing character into
Yeah.
something that's unrecognizable.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Green Lantern is one of those brands within DC where it's very easy to do that. Whereas,
yeah,
Justice League, it might be a little bit more difficult, but you can create new characters. I mean, that was the beauty of, Jack Kirby, Stan Lee. I mean, Stan Lee purposely realized, wow, I don't have any black characters. We need to have that kind of representation. So he didn't take, a character and just swap him out. He created a black character. And that black character is extremely, you look at Luke Cage, you look at Black Panther. I mean, these are awesome characters. And I think DC and Marvel, that creative element, I mean, that should be a big part of who they are. And these new characters need to be created where you can be more relatable. So, yeah, that's so important. But Green Lantern is one of the most simple brands within DC to do that because when tragedy strikes, that ring needs to find another host. There's your opportunity to do just that. And you saw with Simon Baz, who is an absolute, he's a badass, man. I love Simon Baz, right?
yeah,
And here he is. He's an incredible character, Muslim. He's relatable to a larger community that never was relatable before. You have Jessica Cruz, who's Hispanic. She has a lot of tragedy, right? She saw her friends get murdered. She has this huge issue of anxiety. She has a problem being able to come out of her shell at times. There's a whole host of people who have, in a much smaller way, that same issue of being able to kind of come out of their shell. And here you've created these two characters that I think are very relatable. And I think Green Lantern is the perfect, brand under DC to be able to do more and more of those type of characters. So I love Green Lantern for that. And yeah, we'll see down
yeah.
the road if they don't continue to do that. Yeah, it'll be a lot of fun.
Awesome, Thomas. We're coming to time, but before we go, can you give a quick spiel on what's Kingsville about and the campaign itself?
Yeah, I mean, if you like stories about corruption, lies, entities taking advantage of people who they should be helping, superhumans on the outside that seem to be doing really great things for their communities, but inwardly are trying to kill anybody who gets in their way of gaining more power than Kingsville is for you. Issue one, I think, ended in a bang. You saw all these superhumans taking care of a group of people who were standing up against AGS. Issue two, that gets taken to a whole new level as they grow more hungry for psychodone, that element that creates superhumans. They're willing to do anything and everything to get their hands on that. And if you're in their way, they have no problem removing you very quickly. So, yeah, Kingsville 2 right now. We have about 20 days left in our Kickstarter. We would love for you to participate. We have all kinds of cool add ons. If you missed one, you could add on one and get one and two as a package. We got stickers, we got trading cards, we got this awesome sweater by Champion. We got some really cool gear, a lot of cool stuff. But we would love for you to back Kingsville issue 2. A lot of fun, and hey, we're committed. We're already through the first 2 pages of issue 3, so we could really use your help. But we appreciate you. Hopefully, you enjoyed Kingsville 1, and I can't wait for you to get Kingsville 2 in your hands. So, Rob, you will have the link for the Kickstarter. Make it really easy. You could follow us at World at War Comics on any and every platform. from YouTube to Instagram to TikTok, and I post quite a bit about our Kickstarter and where we're at. So if you want more information, please check us out. But Sarab, thank you so much for having me on. I always enjoy being on the show.
No, thank you so much for coming on the show, Thomas. I always appreciate you coming here and like just and if a campaign you want to fund this December, this is the one you should do it, because obviously Thomas is a great creator and he loves the indie community. He loves indie comics. He loves comics in general. And like I've obviously read his work before. It's great. Kingsville issue 1 is amazing. If you haven't read that just yet, you can do that as well, as a part of this campaign. And it's one of those campaigns that will fulfill, because he's a genuine lover of comics. He will always make good with the fans. So I trust Thomas with that. Thank you again for coming on the show, Thomas. It was great having you, and all the
Thank you.
best for the
Froze
rest
again,
of your
Sarab.
campaign.